I did. I left the corporate job to pursue my purpose. That landed into Right to Real Love and starting that podcast back in 2014. And as you mentioned, have now launched two others. And, just trying to manage it all is definitely a challenge, but it's one that I'm up to.
Yeah, that's extremely, inspiring because you said 2014. Did you launch it on YouTube at that time, or what
No,
platforms were you on?
no. So the podcast was originally audio only. So I just got into this YouTube thing last year in November when it came to Right to Real Love. I decided to make a transition from putting out multiple podcast episodes on the audio podcast and switch to doing one weekly live stream. And then additionally, clipping up some videos from that stream and putting them up on YouTube. So I'm actually scaling back from the audio side and making the YouTube channel the primary focus now for Right to Real Love.
Okay. Well, and I've actually done that too. Because the audio side, it's a lot. Like, it's a lot of cutting. It's a lot of, you got to have more quality audio, right?
Yeah.
If you got some visuals, you're like, okay, well, I see the visual, even if the audio ain't, 1,000%. That visual is a next level of entertainment. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so, what was that spark that was like, you know what, I gotta go video? Did somebody say something to you? Because I had a friend that checked me and was like, bro, why ain't you on YouTube heavy?
Yeah.
He was like, you got some content, but you need to be on YouTube.
So I got to go back before I can come back to where we are, right? Which is, for me, this journey as a content creator didn't even start back in 2014. Like, I've been in this thing for well over 10 years, and I actually got my start on YouTube. So I actually went from being a YouTuber back in the day, almost 10 years ago. I was actually doing what would be considered audio podcast on YouTube. Like, I wasn't on camera or anything, but I was having discussions and it was just audio. And then I would throw some visuals up there to keep the people entertained to a certain extent. And somebody caught wind of the videos and they were enjoying them, and they left a comment and was like, yo, you should start a podcast. And 10 years ago, ain't nobody know what a podcast, and neither did I. And I was like, yo, what's that? And long story short, I did some figuring out, and I was like, oh, it's actually what I've been doing without doing the visual part. I was like, I can definitely do that. And that's where the journey started for me, is 10 years ago, just kind of stumbling into it. But YouTube is something I've always wanted to return to. I've actually made multiple returns to YouTube over the years. Like I said, that's where I started 10 years ago. And then I would say back in maybe like 2012-ish, 2012-ish, 13-ish, I was still on YouTube and doing that with the podcast at the same time. And then I eventually just went to just doing the podcast alone. And then I was still having this itch, like, yo, I got to get back. I want to go back to YouTube. I think it was maybe like 5 years ago, and I came back, but I really didn't stick with it. And now it was just like now or never. Like, with the whole 2020 thing that went down, I just had, honestly, for me, it was my mom. She was like, yo, you've been talking about going on YouTube. Why don't you get back on there? And for me, I was like, yo, I got to have a setup that looked like Tommy's. Like, YouTube is different from like 10 years ago. Back then, didn't nobody care about your background. You ain't had to have the dope, lighting and the setup. And I just felt like I'm not in a place where I can hop on screen without just having, y'all see this plain vanilla background behind me, right? And my mom was like, yo, you got to just start. Like, don't worry about that. Just go do what you do. And eventually you'll be able to bring to reality that dream and that vision that you have in your mind. But don't let that be the thing that stops you from just getting started. Clearly, I didn't do that in 2020, but thankfully 2021, I finally was like, okay, let's do it.
Well, your mom's, man, like, that's, bro, like, you got a real life superhero. You know what I'm saying? That was telling you to go, because a lot of people, like, their parents don't understand this space.
Right.
They don't. There's a disconnect. You hear about people, and obviously we're creators that do a lot of this stuff out of passion.
Right.
Like, you tell us through and through. Because in the beginning, when you start, you pull back, you start, you pull back. It's one of those things where ain't no money coming in. You ain't got no dollars. You ain't $0. Like, so you really got to play the long game.
Right. Yo, shout out to my man from the social proof podcast. He used the term that summed me up perfectly, which is, I was a contentpreneur. Like, that's it. That's all I was doing. All I was doing was producing content, not generating any profit or any income. And I saw a video of his where he was speaking of being in a similar space. He clearly didn't do it as long as I did because he's smart. But that's when I heard him say it, I was like, yo, I literally spent like the last 8 years being a contentpreneur. And I'm like, yo, I got to change that.
So what? Okay.